Brandon had a car accident. When I arrived at the hospital, the female secretary was peeling an apple for him. In the midst of the panic, the fruit knife grazed her finger. Brandon nervously grabbed the secretary's hand. Blood was flowing. "Nurse, nurse, hurry up." After the chaos of war, he suddenly turned pale when our eyes met. I calmly set down the apple in my hand. "Apple, should I still eat it?" Lily's fingers were wrapped in a thick layer of gauze. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she trembled. My gaze swept over the apple that had fallen under the bed. Half peeled, still attached to its skin. "Why don't you continue to carve?" Lily's delicate little face instantly turned pale as she looked at the man in the hospital bed with a pleading expression. Brandon frowned. "Sophie, don't make it hard for her. Clearly, what I was doing before I came in has now become a dilemma." Lily breathed a sigh of relief, exaggeratedly. She stood up a bit awkwardly. "Sophie and Brandon got into an accident just to take me home." After saying this, before I could say anything, she turned red-eyed and said, "I'm really sorry for causing you trouble." She bowed deeply. I waited for a long time. I didn't say anything. I glanced at Brandon, wanting to say something but stopping myself, and then I took my bag and left the ward. The room had been quiet for a long time. Brandon's gaze finally fell on me, and I thought you were asleep. I don't know how to respond to this. 2 hours ago, it was a message from Brandon. He said there would be a meeting in the evening and told me not to wait for him to have dinner. At that time I was in his company's parking lot, witnessing Lily getting into the passenger seat. I did not reply to Brandon's message. The ward was quiet for a long time. I picked up the apple, holding the fruit knife in my hand, but I hesitated to make the cut. "Apple peel." "I won't peel it." I raised my head and said lightly, "I thought you were in a meeting too." Brandon's expression was stiff on his face. A sudden knock on the door sounded at that moment. Lily's half-face peeked in, cautiously. "Brandon. I forgot to bring my perfume." She ran into the house. A fragrant breeze swept past me. There is a beautifully wrapped gift box on Brandon's bedside. It hasn't been opened yet. Lily picked it up, biting her lip as she explained, "Sophie, I asked Brandon to help me choose. Sophie, you don't overthink it. With her appearance like this, no woman would think the relationship is innocent." The fruit knife was slapped down on the table by me. With a loud bang. Lily seemed startled, looking at me anxiously. I have a blank expression, but your Brandon said he was in a meeting. Lily suddenly lifted her head. She looked at Brandon in shock, then turned to me. "Brandon, he will only accompany me after the meeting is over." "Enough," Brandon interrupted her. Lily's eyes turned red. Brandon was a bit displeased. "Sophie, don't scare her." He softened his expression again and looked at Lily. "You go back first, it's not your concern." She looked at him in surprise. A few seconds later, she obediently lowered her head. "Okay." Only the two of us were left in the ward. The atmosphere was once heavy. The sound of suppressed breathing came from the sickbed. Brandon rubbed his forehead. "Sophie, Lily's birthday is coming up, we don't mean anything else. His adjective is us." I suddenly feel bored. It started to rain outside. The dense raindrops pounded against the window. Brandon's expression changed. A hint of worry flashed in his eyes, quickly masked by him. I heard Brandon's phone ringing. A girl's gentle voice came through the receiver. "Brandon, it's raining heavily outside, I didn't bring an umbrella, and I'm so worried about your health." I don't know what Brandon replied. Lily's voice came again. "I'm still not going back, Sophie, she seems to care a lot about my presence." Brandon's expression was somewhat unpleasant. Our eyes met. "Sophie, she is a child." I looked at her. "A 26-year-old little girl?" She pressed her lips together. No response. I suddenly couldn't hold back my emotions. "Or do you wish that it was me down there in the rain?" His arrogance softened a bit. "That's not what I meant. Many years ago, there was also a heavy rain like this." I fell while working part-time and fractured my calf. Brandon rushed into the ward in a panic. When he saw me, his eyes turned red. That time, I wanted to save money to buy him a cotton coat. The one he was wearing had already been worn for 3 years. The cuffs were frayed, but he couldn't bear to replace it. At that time, neither of the two had much money. The only fruit to supplement vitamins was apples. It's Guoguang brand. 10 yuan for a bag, 15 jin. The skin is very tough, can't bite through it. He patiently peeled the skins, one by one beside me. Then he secretly ate the apple peels that should have been thrown away. I cried from the pain in my heart. Brandon, however, laughed. He said, "Sophie, from now on, I'll peel the skin for you." Later, Brandon succeeded in his business. He could buy any kind of coat he wanted. Whatever fruit he wanted could be delivered to his home. Only, I have never seen Guoguang brand apples again. When the rain stopped, I left the hospital. Brandon seemed a bit nervous. "Sophie, are you angry?" I stopped and didn't move forward. I also didn't look back. Hearing his tentative voice, "I didn't mean to deceive you, I was just afraid you'd overthink it." I struggled to control my voice so it wouldn't tremble. The insurance company called to assess the damage. I heard the man behind me let out a sigh of relief. He said, "Don't overthink it." Walking out of the ward. People come and go in the hospital, with the orthopedics department next to the obstetrics and gynecology department. Men support women, pairs passing by me one after another. Most faces are radiating with the glow of happiness. Only I stand here, feeling out of place. I know what Brandon is testing. He is successful in his entrepreneurship. The people he interacts with are either bosses or elites. In this circle, the ones who love to compare the most are those who have changed a few lovers. At first, Brandon was adamant. He said he would never be associated with such people. But as time went on, Brandon's return home became later and later. Finally, a scent of perfume appeared on him. I remember that smell. Niche, but expensive. Just like the one on Lily. When I returned to the hospital, I brought the porridge I had bought. Pushing open the ward door, I saw my husband being helped out of the bathroom. Lily's face was flushed. Her eyes wandered, unsure of where to look. She seemed extremely shy. Brandon coughed dryly, forcing himself to be supported by her to the bed. There was already a prepared meal box at his bedside. It was clearly something he had cooked and brought himself. I put down the porridge, making a sound. It seemed to disturb the couple in the ambiguous atmosphere. Lily was at a loss. "Sophie." I went to find a nurse, but the nurses were all busy. Brandon couldn't help, so I had to support Brandon to the bathroom by myself. I didn't see anything. My gaze swept over Brandon's evasive eyes. He was in control, his tone as usual. "How's the damage assessment?" I laughed and looked at Lily. "So, is Brandon's big? Is it enough for you?" Lily suddenly changed her expression. She looked at him, unable to say a word. Brandon's face darkened. "Sophie, speak properly." Lily's face turned red. With red-rimmed eyes, she argued, "Sophie, Brandon is in such a hurry, and you're not in the ward. I can't just let Brandon wait in bed." I carefully examined her face for the first time. Round and fair. Her forehead smooth. Very much like I was when I was young. As Lily's words fell, Brandon's expression gradually turned colder. He looked at the two distinctly different breakfasts on the table and suddenly spoke. "Where did you go last night?" "Where?" "Of course, I went home to sleep." I didn't say anything. He sneered coldly, saying that I chose perfume for Lily, which could at least earn me a homemade breakfast. "But what about you? Did you settle the damages all night?" "Sophie, have you ever thought that I can't take care of myself right now? You left me alone in the hospital, and Lily came to help. What's wrong with that?" "Brandon." Lily's eyes were red, she leaned back against him, and then looked up at me with a face full of stubbornness. Brandon had a cast on his leg, and when I arrived, he couldn't move at all. It was really pitiful. She lowered her voice. That kind of scene is something that would make anyone feel heartbroken. I smiled faintly. Lily, the law states that whoever asserts must provide evidence. As of now, is there any controversy about who Brandon had an affair with and who was hurt and taken care of? Lily widened her eyes in panic. We didn't. Sophie, Brandon gritted his teeth and said, the more you talk, the more ridiculous it gets. I didn't plan to ruin the relationship right now. I picked up the packaged vegetable porridge and was about to leave. Behind me, however, I heard Brandon angrily calling my name. He pressed down the fire, took a deep breath. Lily just now saw nothing, you should hold back those unpleasant words. I nodded. Good. I shook the small porridge in my hand at them. Are you not going to eat it? Don't waste it, I'll take it to feed the dog. I turned and left. I heard the woman's soft sobs coming from the ward. Before the elevator arrived, the man's gentle coaxing came again. I closed my eyes. Emotionally, I was unexpectedly calm even to myself. Brandon is attending a meeting this time. It's not the first time he has deceived me. But the first time was also because of Lily. The banquet. Brandon, who always insisted on having me accompany him, suddenly told me that this time no one brought a partner. I cooperated and did not go. That night, I saw a photo posted by a mutual friend. Brandon was holding the little girl's shoulder, using his left hand to push away the drink meant for her. I hadn't seen him smile so freely in a long time. On the way home, when he saw that I had discovered it, he forced a smile and begged for mercy. Give the newcomer some room to grow, dear, don't be angry. I just felt that she resembled you a little, which stirred my compassion. If someone had promoted both of us back then, we wouldn't have had to eat apple peels for so long. I first learned that the fruit peels I had eaten were the most unbearable past in Brandon's heart. That day, I didn't argue with him. But Brandon was scared. After a night of silence, he swore an oath. From now on, he would keep his distance from her. Whether it's Lily or Linda, he is gone. Unfortunately, it didn't take long. I heard that Brandon officially hired a newcomer as a secretary. The secretary's name is Lily. Brandon returned home, leaning on a crutch. Lily supported him, her entire face flushed and damp with a light sweat. She saw me. Immediately let go of Brandon's hand. Flustered and at a loss, Sophie, I was just helping Brandon, I didn't do anything. I stared at her slightly parted lips. Before trying to cover it up, remember to wipe your mouth dry. She gasped and covered her lips, revealing only her glistening eyes. Don't mention Brandon, even I, after seeing her, can't help but want to pamper a woman like that. Sure enough, he was lightly coughing. Perhaps he accidentally brushed against the flowers when he helped me just now. Lily nodded in agreement, her hand still unwilling to leave her mouth, as if waiting for someone to say another word, ready for the tears to fall in big drops. I turned my head. Over there, Lily was in constant motion, pulling out a perfume bottle from her bag and placing it on the coffee table, before stepping back. Sophie, this is the money Brandon paid, I'm returning it to you. Brandon hasn't recovered yet, please don't argue with him because of me. She bowed to me and ran away. At the same time, I received a friend request on WeChat. After adding them, the other party did not speak. He silently posted a message on his moments. He gave a lot of things, the ones he didn't like could be thrown away. The accompanying image is the perfume that appeared on my coffee table. Such a low-level provocation. I calmly locked the screen and turned around. Behind her, the man's voice was slightly urgent, Sophie, where are you going? I turned around. Busy, is there something? Brandon's chest rose and fell twice. Closing my eyes, I went home, and Lily was gone too. I nodded. He gritted his teeth, I let Lily go, please don't be angry anymore. You weren't at the hospital with me, I couldn't be alone. Sophie, can you stop messing around? Try to understand me a little, okay? I said, okay. When I saw Brandon's expression turn to relief, I picked up the phone. What's Lily's number? I'll call her and ask her to come back. The satisfaction in his eyes instantly crumbled. Sophie, are you crazy? I'm your husband, and you let another woman come to our home to take care of me? My gaze fell on his face. What's wrong with that? Facing his astonishment, I smiled lightly. Isn't it something that couples can do, something you two have long been prepared for? Brandon froze his face. Yes. Brandon has been driving my car recently. I heard everything on the dash cam. Including him accompanying Lily to choose perfume. Including them making an appointment at the restaurant. If it weren't for this car accident, their next destination would have been the hotel. Even Brandon said that Lily should choose an apartment near the company. What else is there to say? I didn't stay any longer and turned to enter the bedroom. The living room fell silent for a long time. The sound of a cane falling to the ground. I have also leaned on a cane before. My calf was fractured, and I was in a cast for a long time. But even if the body is not well, life must go on. Brandon goes out during the day to run his business. At night, he rushes home as fast as he can to take care of me. That day when he came home, I fell to the ground. The plaster cracked in half. When we went to the hospital, he scolded me, "You clearly have a fracture, why are you getting out of bed? Wait until I get home to take care of you." At that time I only felt wronged. Today is your birthday, and I want to make you a bowl of birthday noodles. Brandon stood frozen in place. I didn't cry. Yet his eyes turned red. At that moment, he fiercely held me in his arms. Sophie, I will treat you well for the rest of my life. If I let you down, I will surely be struck by lightning. At that time, he was in the early stages of starting his business. He had no money. There were no friends around him. No one remembered his birthday. Only I did. Brandon himself forgot his vow. Or rather, he was not assimilated by the larger environment. Instead, he was just that kind of person at his core. In the living room. The footsteps are uneven. The door to the study is knocked on. Brandon lowered his voice. Sophie, let's talk about Lily, I think I can explain it to you. He opened the door with a spare key. I was sorting through the documents for marital property. He frowned slightly. What are you doing? I paused. Put the materials aside for now and take stock, they've gathered dust. Brandon stood up straight, and we hadn't done anything out of line. I looked up at him. So what? His Adam's apple rolled, and before he could say anything, my phone kept buzzing with notifications. It was from a new friend request. Sophie, is Brandon feeling better? I'm a bit worried about Brandon, after all, I've always been the one taking care of him. Huh? Sophie, why aren't you replying? Are you busy? Or are you mad at Brandon? Don't fight because of me, we really have nothing going on. She had been out of the house for no more than 2 hours. Concerned greetings came very quickly. I replied to her, is it more enjoyable for you two to have an affair with me involved? In front of me, Brandon seemed a bit impatient. Sophie, can you stop looking at your phone and listen to me? He emphasized word by word, Lily and I are completely innocent. I don't know what you have guessed that led to this misunderstanding, but you cannot. My phone was shoved in front of his face. All the words Brandon wanted to say were stuck in his throat. The reason is that Lily sent me a picture. On the hospital bed, she lies next to Brandon with her eyes closed, her face full of shyness. VIP ward. There are both folding beds and companion beds. What kind of excuse could possibly make sense of this situation? I stared into Brandon's eyes, sneering. The picture in the phone was immediately retracted by Lily. The voice message she sent was filled with panic. Sophie, I just clicked the wrong thing, I sent it by mistake, you didn't see it, right? Brandon's face changed in an instant. He swayed unsteadily, grabbing the edge of the table. Sophie, Lily, doesn't understand the intrigues of women. That day, the heating system in the hospital was broken, and she helped me warm up because she was afraid I would be cold. I quietly looked at him. The phone rang with a notification again. Lily's voice played automatically. She was cautious. "Sophie, are you angry?" That day, it was just that I was too cold, which is why I was with Brandon. Don't think too much about it. Brandon's expression froze for a moment. I raised my chin. No need to explain, both of you are cold, I understand. I stacked the real estate documents neatly. As if sensing something, Brandon suddenly covered my hand. "Sophie, why are you doing this?" I pulled my hand away, unable to resist, pushed his body aside, and went into the bathroom to wash and disinfect my hands. Brandon followed behind. His eyes filled with suspicion. "What do you mean, Sophie, do you think I'm dirty?" I turned off the faucet. While wiping the back of my hand with an alcohol wipe, I didn't look up. "This hand of yours must have held Lily." He stiffened. His face turned pale and ashen for quite a while. "Everyone around me is like this, Sophie, why can't you understand me? Do I have to be a breath of fresh air?" He couldn't hide his disappointment. "Sophie, stop making a fuss, I will get tired too." Although I had already made my decision, Brandon's sudden change of expression still left me blank for a few seconds. What spreads from the bottom of my heart is not grievance. Instead, it is the dust settling as it should. I stared at him. In a soft voice, I replied, "Okay, no more fuss." Brandon was taken aback. It was unexpected. I dried my hands, walked past him, and put on my shoes. Brandon finally reacted, leaning on his crutch as he came over, frowning deeply. "Where are you going?" I didn't turn back. I closed the door. Arrived at the law firm. The property assessment was not yet completed when I received a call from Brandon. "I can tell he is holding back. Where did you go? When will you be back?" On the other end of the phone, a faint sound of glass shattering on the ground can be heard. Then came the girl's exclamation. Lily's voice was filled with frustration. "Brandon, I accidentally bumped into the picture frame, what should I do?" I didn't hear the conversation behind me. Brandon hurriedly hung up the phone. Soon, his message came, "Don't think too much, I fell and couldn't reach you, so I called her to help. She left quickly." I put down my phone. Silent and speechless. There is only one picture frame in the house. When my leg was better, he couldn't wait to propose. Since we couldn't afford a wedding photo shoot, we asked the nurse to help us take pictures downstairs at the hospital. Brandon promised that when he had money, he would take me around the world to wear the most beautiful wedding dresses. But once he had money, he no longer had time. That frame holds our only photo together. I stood up and walked over to the lawyer. I pointed at the asset he was verifying. "This house, I don't want it. It's dirty. Disgusting. After getting married. This is the first time I haven't gone home." Brandon's call came right on time. 9 o'clock. "Why haven't you come home yet?" Before I could say anything, he quickly added, "Lily has already left, my leg hurts a bit, and I haven't eaten." His words were like the first time I learned about Lily. He presented the steps to me, and once I took that step down, he would join Lily, testing my limits time and again. Such tricks, when played too often, only make one feel bored. This time, I didn't respond, but informed him word by word, "Brandon, let's get a divorce." There was a long silence on the phone. Then Brandon responded with a feigned bravado, "What strange things are you saying? Is divorce something you can just say easily? I've already told you, I haven't done anything to wrong you, why is this still going on?" I spoke calmly, "I've assessed the property on my side, and the divorce agreement will be sent to you shortly. By the way, are you at home now?" Brandon finally realized I wasn't joking. His voice was tense. "What divorce agreement? I never thought about divorcing you." On the phone, there was only the sound of me flipping through the divorce agreement. When you get it, you can carefully read the third page, which has a detailed division of assets. "Sophie?" Brandon's voice showed a crack. Are you serious? Why isn't it real? It's just like Brandon trying to make me accept the fact that he has a little lover. Although it's a test, isn't it still true? I controlled the steadiness of my tone. Although there is no legal term for walking away with nothing, it would support compensation for the faulted party in a divorce. What I want now is half. Don't make me go to the point of divorce proceedings, causing everyone to look bad. On the other end of the phone, there was the sound of something falling to the ground. Brandon's voice trembled slightly. No lawsuits, Sophie, I do not agree to the divorce. Okay, then I will proceed with the legal proceedings. Brandon unilaterally cut off the phone. After thinking it over, I decided to contact a courier to deliver the divorce agreement to Brandon. It would be best if he was willing to sign it. Legal proceedings are, after all, troublesome. As I was getting ready to sleep, the phone rang again. It was Brandon calling. He didn't say anything for a long time. I frowned. Do you have any objections to the content of the agreement? He seemed unable to take in my words and spoke in a hoarse voice. Sophie, I've been thinking for a long time. I have not truly crossed any boundaries in my marriage. Lily is just a female colleague, and I don't believe this is a reason for you and me to get a divorce. Why have you changed so much all of a sudden? He paused, his voice filled with doubt. Are you experiencing something else? I felt it was ridiculous after my shock. Brandon, are you going to use your trick of dumping the shit pot on me? He was silent for a few seconds. If you no longer mention divorce, we can have a good talk. He said, to this day, my body remains loyal, having never touched anyone. I retorted, what if you hadn't had the car accident? Without that accident, according to their planned itinerary, shopping dates, straight to the hotel. Brandon even had an excuse ready. After the meeting, he would be entertaining clients. If it weren't for the car accident, Lily might have already been pregnant. Brandon was silent on the phone for a long time and finally, in frustration, said, but the accident has already happened, and we still haven't done anything. I calmly said, what about in the hospital? Did nothing happen there either? Brandon's voice came to an abrupt stop. I laughed, and Lily said with her hand, does that mean you're not cheating? He panicked, what are you talking about? I calmly stated the facts. 6 days ago, I went to the hospital. I saw Lily come out of the bathroom, her demeanor full of charm. It seemed she was afraid I wouldn't understand. She shook her hand in front of me and smiled contentedly. Sophie, I'm a bit tired. At that time, Brandon was on the sickbed, surrounded by privacy curtains. The ground was covered with used paper balls. The entire ward was filled with an ambiguous and lascivious scent. I immediately turned and walked out the door. At that time, I could still hear Brandon asking, Lily, what's wrong? Lily's voice was charming. It's nothing, Brandon, just my hands are so sore. The man lowered his voice to inquire about the cold and warmth. The next day, 200,000 was missing from the bank card. But it doesn't matter. Those expenses were all deducted from the portion of assets that Brandon received. It should be mine. Not a single cent less. When Brandon found my new place, I wasn't particularly surprised. This house was the second one he bought. It was written in my name. When the key was handed to me, he said, if I ever make you sad in the future, you can move here. This is the guarantee I give you. I never doubted Brandon's sincerity at that time. Unfortunately, sincerity is fickle. He leaned on a cane, stubble covering his chin, looking weary and weathered. What are you here for? I looked at him, to deliver the agreement? Brandon suddenly grabbed my hand. Sophie, I know I did wrong, but I never thought about divorcing you. It was only after you left that I realized I really couldn't accept it. Whether it's Lily or Linda, I only have one wife, and that's Sophie. I don't want anyone else, and can't accept anyone else. He emphasized, in the hospital, Lily and I didn't have a relationship. I know you mind, this time I really understand. Can I notify the HR department to dismiss her? In the future, no matter which circle is chaotic, I won't be with them, okay? The cane fell to the ground. He tried to hold me while speaking. His breath sprayed against my neck, a dense wave of nausea surged up my throat. I pushed open the door forcefully. Brandon crashed into the security door with a sound. He was momentarily stunned. With red-rimmed eyes, "Sophie, no matter how dirty this circle is, my feelings for you have never changed." I can't help the disgust in my eyes. "Would you be able to accept it if I touched you with other men?" He was taken aback. His lips trembled, but he couldn't utter a word. "You can't accept it, can you?" I sneered, taking a step closer to meet his gaze. "So what gives you the right to ask me to have no reservations?" His voice choked. "I didn't mean that, what I meant was I can make it up to you." I stared at him. I watched him stand up by the door without reaching out. Suddenly asked, "Do you still remember your promise when I broke my bone?" Brandon's face drained of color inch by inch. I continued, "I don't know if you can be struck by lightning, but right now, all I know is that even if you were killed by lightning, I wouldn't want to look at you again." "Brandon, you really make me feel sick." He couldn't believe it. He stared at me with wide eyes. I pushed open the door, stepped out boldly, and closed the door behind me in front of him. "If you like, you can stay here, I'm leaving to file for divorce." "Brandon, I hope you can loudly tell the judge in court that using your hands is not out of line." "Sophie," he shouted my name. I walked out. Just happened to pass by his cane. I didn't see it and accidentally kicked it a bit far. The divorce lawsuit was filed quickly. Brandon received the court summons shortly after. Before the court session, it was Lily who started to frantically seek attention. The messages she sent me were filled with a tone of crying. "Sophie, why are you forcing Brandon to fire me with a divorce? I never thought about arguing with you. Brandon has taken me to many parties, and he fired me. How will other bosses see me? Such a pitiful act, one can easily guess who she wants to impress." I did not respond. Or perhaps Brandon did not respond to her invitation, and Lily began to go wild. "You were always the unnecessary person, why do you always have to interrupt others at the wrong time? What are you doing, Sophie? You clearly succeeded on this path too, so why are you trying to block others' way?" Lily's words refer to Brandon's company, in which I have 15% of the shares. I find it somewhat ridiculous. But I still took the time to reply to her message. "The path I walk is different from yours. Brandon's company is something I built step by step alongside him. You want to replicate my path to success without putting in the same effort. Someone like you, who can only rely on their looks, do you think you can compare to me?" I didn't wait for her response. I blocked her contact. Such a person. Utterly shameless. The matter of the divorce lawsuit with Brandon has caused quite a stir in the circle. Before the court session, I happened to encounter Brandon in a wheelchair. The one pushing the wheelchair wasn't Lily, but rather a male assistant I had never seen before. He stared at me from a distance. His lips were somewhat chapped, as if in reluctance, as if in disappointment. "Sophie, do you know? People in the circle have been contacting me lately. There are quite a few who keep women outside, and their wives all know, but only you have caused such an uproar, making it quite embarrassing for everyone." I stopped in my tracks. "You mean we should go back to the Qing dynasty and make your polygamy reasonable?" "It's not that there's no way." I smiled at him and saw the obvious emotion rising in Brandon's eyes. I said word by word, "Why don't you try getting struck by lightning? If you die, you'll travel back to ancient times, and then you can have 3 wives and 4 concubines. I seriously suggest, you should give it a try, that's how it's portrayed in the TV dramas." The hope in Brandon's eyes shattered into pieces. Before Sophie stepped into the courtroom, he called me back. His fists were clenched tightly on his legs. I admitted my mistake. Could we not have come to this point? In the courtroom, we were just waiting for the two of us to take our seats. I smiled distantly. "Do you still remember what I asked you during the meeting?" Brandon's face turned pale instantly. He remembered. That day, I once asked him, if I want to tell you good news, can we not have a meeting, can we not go this far? At that time, Brandon's tone was gentle, the business meeting won't take long, can I hear the good news when I get home? He seemed to think of something and quickly slid his wheelchair to grab my hand. At that time, what good news were you going to tell me? Sophie, what was that news? That day, what I wanted to tell you was that I was pregnant, and we were going to become a real family. His gaze suddenly fell on my belly. With a look of longing, Sophie, we won't get divorced, we're going home, we have children, we're starting over, I will be a good dad. I bent down and looked straight into his eyes. But that day in the parking lot when I saw you and Lily together, I went to the hospital to have an abortion. I smiled, otherwise, why would I have gone to the hospital so quickly? He instantly turned red in my sight. Trembling all over, Sophie, are you taking revenge on me? You would give up the child just to get back at me? I shook off his hands that were gripping mine and scoffed, you're thinking too much. I just don't want my child to have a father like you, being born would be his shame. Having said this, I no longer held back. I turned around and took the lead, stepping into the courtroom. The submitted evidence includes a complete conversation between the two of them in the car. The couple's relationship has broken down, and no further proof is needed. A final verdict. Years of marriage are hereby declared over. As he walked out of the building, Brandon sat in a daze in front of the entrance. I turned my head and walked to another road in the opposite direction from him. Thus, we parted ways, each going our own way, unrelated to each other. In the evening, someone has arranged a gathering to celebrate my first day of being single. As everyone clinks glasses at the table, the atmosphere is lively, and someone starts clapping. Soon, more than a dozen men walked in and stood in a line. Someone teased me, Sophie, you didn't have a husband before, and now you're single. Hurry up and have some fun, no need to stick to the rules. There are women laughing beside her, giving Sophie two, one on the left and one on the right, hurry up, I'll pay for her. In the private room, the atmosphere was lively. Brandon didn't know. Except for his business circle. In Haicheng, there is also an upper-class circle of ladies. He has his little mistress to compete with them. In the circle of wives, there are little pups raised within the circle of wives. It's not certain who plays more extravagantly than whom. But it's not just the same hobbies that can help one integrate into a group. Although I haven't ordered anything. But I still get along well with everyone. During the meal, someone who had drunk too much secretly told me, Sophie, don't be so serious all the time. In this circle, your ex-husband has been here often, one on the left and one on the right, it's something they've done long ago, haha. The party ended a bit late. I had a few drinks and felt slightly tipsy. The sound of high heels came out from the club. Right in front of me, she lit a woman's cigarette. Sophie, did you do well? I nodded. The woman across smiled and said, all right, since you've succeeded, it's my turn now. When I get divorced, you must help me. I laughed, all right, I'll help you bump into your husband. The woman shot me a glare. There's also the mistress, the one prepared for Brandon wasn't used, let's have it for my old Wang. The one you prepared is also the type that old Wang likes. I agreed to everything. A light rain began to fall from the sky. It felt cold and damp against my skin, and the alcohol stirred within me a little. Long ago, I had already known about the sordid affairs in their business circle. The girl I originally prepared was just a test. I didn't expect that before the test even began, Brandon had already stumbled with another woman. No, it should be said that Brandon had such thoughts long ago. It was just that Lily appeared earlier, more in line with his desire for excitement. The woman in front of me blew a smoke ring. Suddenly frowning, she asked, I heard you were pregnant before? Did you have an abortion? Have you finished your confinement and are drinking now? No. I shook my head with a smile, took a slender cigarette from her cigarette case, lit it, and had never been pregnant, just fooling around. The acrid smoke entered my throat, and I coughed. The woman stared wide-eyed in shock, then burst into laughter. You really are something, Sophie. Although Brandon is a jerk, he does have a business mind. Half of his net worth is quite substantial. When traveling to the Maldives, I heard the latest news about Brandon. Brandon's leg hasn't fully healed yet, but he attended the signing ceremony. The multinational company collaborated and also invited local news media. It was at this moment that Lily burst in crying, accusing Brandon of abandoning her after starting the affair. She shouted and made a scene, ruining Brandon's signing ceremony. Even though Brandon used many connections, in the end, he couldn't recover the losses. Business is truly a strange circle. When you lack the ability to step in, you can push your way in step by step with the determination to rise. But when you walk in and fall back into the mire, no one acknowledges ever having crossed paths with you. I only heard that Brandon has been having a hard time lately. Dragging his legs that still can't walk, he is trying hard to run and make amends. I no longer pay attention to the developments that follow. Whether he makes a comeback or falls to the depths, in the end, we will be strangers, and we may never meet again. In the pool, someone called me to come down and play. I smiled and got up. Coming. The water in the Maldives is indeed vibrant and colorful.